Hello YouTube! Welcome to part 2 of creating your first Ionic Angular app. In this tutorial, we're going to integrate user registration and authentication using Firebase. So this tutorial is a continuation of a previous tutorial where we built a basic login user interface and a simple routing mechanism to navigate from the login page to the home page. Please note that the previous tutorial used Ionic 4 and Ionic 5 has since been released, so we're using Ionic 5 in this part 2. But as far as the concepts are concerned, there's no significant difference, so it doesn't matter whether you're using Ionic 4 or Ionic 5. If you haven't watched the previous tutorial, you can click on the link showing on your screen right now, or you can check in the description below for the said link. So we are working with a project template that has already been created, and you can download that code using the link showing on your screen right now or a description below. So without further ado, let's get started. So we're gonna start off by having a tour of the project. So here it is, Ionic Firebase login. And here we can see the project files. So if I just right click and select open with Visual Studio Code, we'll open up the project in our code editor. So if we go to source and app, and let's start off with our routing module. If we check out the routing module, we'll see that our default path has been set to the login page, right? So the first page that opens when we launch our application is the login page. So let's take a look at the login page. So here is the HTML for our login page. It says, of course, login on the title. And we have a card. So the card is going to be the featuring component on this page. In our card header, we have our image, the CodeSwag logo, and we have the text in the card title that says login. Then inside the Ion card content, we have an Ion input for our username and a placeholder saying username so that the user knows what this field is for. We have an input for our password, again with the placeholder of password, and we have the type set to password. This means that when the user is typing in his or her password, it's going to be masked as we are accustomed to with passwords. And then finally, we have a button which is having a size of block, and when the button is clicked, it will launch the login function. So let's check out login.page.ts, and in this file we can see that we have our login method, and what it does is it simply uses the Angular router to navigate us to the home page. Let's check out the home page and homepage.html, and the home page. So this is a new feature in Ionic 5. We have this header and we have the the collapsible header. So this will be slightly different from our previous tutorial, but it doesn't really have a bearing in the concepts that we're covering. In the homepage, again, we have an Ion card. We have our logo up here. We have the text that says welcome and a link to the codeswag.co.uk website. And a little description that just talks about CodeSwag, a website with software development tutorials, and an online store for developers with the latest tech and awesome merchandise. So basically, that is the application. Let's head to the command line and launch our application in the browser so we can check it out when it's running. So let's minimize this window, and if you have Git installed in Windows, you can just right click and use open git bash here, and that's going to open a terminal in the appropriate folder. So we want to run Ionic Serve. If you've just downloaded the code from the link that I'm giving you, you actually need to first run npm I or npm install and then press enter. This will make sure that all the dependencies for the project have been installed. But I already have the dependencies installed, so I'm gonna go ahead and run Ionic Serve. So I'm gonna press Ctrl+Shift+I. That's going to open the Chrome Developer Tools, and we have this window for our app, and we can see we have our login screen. So if I click login, it will just switch us to the home page. So that's it for the basic application demo. Let's now get started integrating our application with Firebase. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to navigate to the page firebase.google.com, and you're going to land on this page. Make sure that you're logged in to your Google account, and you can click here in the top right corner to say go to console. So this takes us to our Firebase console, and we need to add a new project. And let's create a name for our new project. So we're just going to call it Ionic Login. And click continue. We are not going to enable Google Analytics for this project right now, and create project. Okay, our project is ready. Let's click continue. And this is going to take us to the project dashboard. So what we want to do here is we want to click here to add an app to get started. We're going to click on web, and we're going to be asked to register a new web app. We're going to call it Ionic Login Firebase, and register application. And then the Firebase configuration is going to load. So what we want to do is we want to copy this object, and gonna click copy and then continue to console. Then in the left panel, we want to click on authentication. And of course, we don't have any users registered. We want to set up our sign-in method. And Firebase allows us to use a number of sign-in methods. We can use email and password, phone, Google, Facebook, Twitter, a bunch of different login methods. In this tutorial, we're going to be using email and password. So we want to enable this and click save. So email and password authentication has been enabled. Next, we want to go back to our application in Windows Explorer. So we want to open another command line instance. Let's maximize this. So now inside our application directory, we now want to integrate Firebase with our application. So we type in npm install Firebase Angular Fire. Okay, so Firebase and Angular Fire have been installed. Next, we want to head to our code editor. So within our code editor, we want to go to the Explorer. And we want to open environments and environment.ts. And in here, we want to add a new entry, and we're going to call that new entry Firebase. So we're going to make Firebase equal to the object that we copied. Right, so these are the settings from our Firebase console. So we're going to put that in environment.ts under an entry for Firebase. So let's make sure that we save this. The next thing is we want to go to app.module.ts and import the necessary files. So let me close everything and reopen them one by one. So next is, let's close environments. We want to go to app.module.ts. So inside app.module.ts, we want to import a number of modules. So first we want to import Angular Fire module. Okay, so we imported the Angular Fire module, the Angular Fire auth module, and our environment settings from the environment.ts file. The next thing is we want to put these imported modules in our imports. So here we have the Angular Fire module, and we're using the initialize app method to import our settings from environment.firebase. This initializes our application and connects it to Firebase using our API details. Then we also import the Angular Fire auth module. So that's it for the app.module.ts file. Let's save this file. Okay, now we can begin on actually working on our application. So let's go to the login page. Let's close this. And we want to open login. And let's open login.module.html and login.page.ts. So in the template file, we want to make sure that we have not only login, but also user registration. So let's copy this button and paste it below. And we want to make sure that we will, okay, let's change this to register. And it will call a register method. And let's put in a different color for this. So we'll put color equal to secondary. So secondary is a preset color in Ionic. Let's go to the browser to check out what it looks like. Let's go to the default route, which is the login route, and we have our register button here with the secondary color. All right, great. So next, let's go to the TypeScript file. And here we already have this, it's simply navigating us to home when we click on login. We're going to change that. But first, let's import the Angular Firebase modules. Okay, so after importing, we want to make sure that we have a user object. So the user object is going to contain our email and password. So let's create the user object. And we're going to say this is equal to an object, and that object is going to have properties of email. So we have our user object, which has an email and a password. The next thing we want to do is we want to make sure that this Angular Fire auth module is imported in our constructor. Next, we are going to work on our login and registration functions. We need to keep in mind that now that we're using Angular Fire Authentication, it is connecting to a remote server over the internet. So that means that it's an asynchronous operation. So we need to keep this in mind when we're creating our functions. So in login here, we need to make sure that this is async. And now we can begin coding. So we're going to say okay, so we've modified our login function. We've made it asynchronous because we are going to be making use of await down here. So we are saying const user equals to await this .ng fire auth dot sign in with email and password. So this is the method that initiates the sign in process. And this method takes two parameters. One is the email and one is the password. And when we're done with that, we're just going to console.log the user object that is returned. So if the returned user object has a property of user.email, this means that we have successfully logged in. And in that case, we are then going to navigate to the home page. However, if the user object does not have the user.email property, that means that login has failed, and instead we're going to give this JavaScript alert to notify the user that the login has failed. Just a little bit about this alert. This is the vanilla JavaScript alert, not the Ionic native alert. We're going to cover the native Ionic alert in a future video. So make sure that you are subscribed so that you can catch that video when it's launched. Next, we have the register function. It is also asynchronous, and we're saying const user equals this dot ngfireauth dot create user with email and password. And again, this function takes in two parameters. One is the email address and one is the password. We're just going to log to our console the object that is returned. Again, if the object has a property of user.emailaddress, that means we have been successful and we're just going to alert that to the user. Otherwise, the registration has failed, and again, we're going to alert that to the user. So some common reasons why registration would probably fail is number one, if there's no internet connection, or if number two, the email address has already been used, or if the email address is not properly formatted. So that's it for the login page. Let's just go and check in our template, and basically it appears that everything is in order. We have our register function here. I'm also making sure that the names are correct, login and register, and those are the same names that we are using up here. So I think that's it for our login page. Let's click Control S or Command S on a Mac in order to save. And I think we are good to go. Let's go to our browser and check everything out. Okay, so we are here in the browser. Let me go back to Firebase, and we want to go to authentication here. And on this page, we can see the users. So we're just going to put in okay, so let's try to register. Okay, so we're getting an error saying uncaught in promise error, the email address is badly formatted. Let's head back to our code and see what's going on. Okay, so after taking a look at our code, I can now see where the problem is. So we have our user object here with email and password. So the default data, the initialized data, is just a blank string. So because we haven't connected these inputs to this object up here, that means that here we are passing in a blank username and a blank password. So in order to fix this, we need to make use of a special HTML attribute in Angular. If I just paste that in, it's called ngModel. So this ngModel connects this user.email field, this one here, to this field right here. So that means anything we type into this field is then assigned over here. So we need to do the same with our password. And let's just change this to user.email.password. And if we save this, this should ensure that we can log in and register as intended. So let's head back to the browser and let's try again. Okay, there we go. So we can see the alert that says registration is successful. And we can see here coming from line 38, our user object is logged to the console. So we can see here we actually have user and the user email. So this is what happens. We get this object back from Firebase when we are successful. If we didn't have that, if we didn't have the, actually, let me not talk about it. We'll just see it in a second. If we come here and if we reload, we should see our user in the Firebase console. Okay, there we go. So we can see we have our user with the email address that we used, tutorials@codeswag.co.uk, and we can see they've been assigned a user ID, and we have the created date and the last date of sign in. And you can see from this icon here that we are using an email provider. So that's great. Let's go back to the application. And as I was saying earlier, this is the object that we get back on successful login, or successful login and successful registration. If you see here, it says login.page.ts line 38. If we go to our code, line 38 is where we are logging the user in our registration function. Okay, so let's clear this and let's try to register with the exact same email and password again. So if we do that, okay, now we're getting a network error. Let me just correct my internet issue and try again. Okay, so my internet is reconnected. Let's try again. Same email that we used before. So I'm gonna try to register with that again. And we can see we get this error that says the email address is already in use by another account. So this means that things are working as we expect. Of course, in a real application, you want to be able to catch that particular error and give the appropriate alert to the user. So let's clear this and let's try logging in. So we have our email and it's the same password, of course. Let's close that, and our login is successful. We are taken to the home page, and again we have this object that has been logged from line 26. And what we were actually checking for was if we have a user object with a user.email address field, this means that this was successful. So this is working as expected. If we go back, let's try to register a new user. And if we, let's clear this, let's register. Of course, registration successful. If we tried to use an email address that isn't properly formatted, like for example, if we just say Charles at, let's try to register this. It will tell us that the email address is badly formatted. Checking the authenticated users, we can see we have charles@yahoo.com. So that's it. Thank you very much for watching this tutorial on implementing Firebase Authentication in your Ionic application. Please remember that the code for this available, both code before we started the tutorial and the code after, so the code that we have implemented in this tutorial is available. You can download that from the links in the description below. Please remember to like this video, click the red subscribe button and the bell icon so that you can be notified of future tutorials. Please also, you may support this channel by going to codeswag.co.uk/shop, where you can find cool gadgets and merchandise, especially for software developers. Thank you very much and have a nice day.